Welcome to the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. Each week, we bring you discussions with educators on how they use blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning to better serve their students. We believe teachers learn best from each other, so this is our way of lifting up the voices of leaders and innovators in our community. This is the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 213 of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. My name is Toni Rose, Deanna, and they, them pronouns, a designated hype person here at MCP, and I am joined today by this rock star elementary school teacher, Drea Siford. Welcome, Drea.
Hello.
It's so exciting to be in this space with you, and thank you so much for saying yes to the podcast. Before we get started, what is bringing you joy currently?
Oh, what is bringing me joy currently? Well, the fall colors. I'm here in Maryland. And so they've just started to really take off. And it's still warm enough to enjoy them. So that's been bringing me some joy.
Oh, that's really nice. I really love the colors that show up in the fall. So yes, yes, and yes. I'm here in Georgia and it is still so hot outside. And that is something to embrace and fight about.
Yeah. I grew up in California. So we got minimal fall colors. So being in the mid-Atlantic for me, that's a real treat, all four seasons.
Yes, that's what I hear all the time from folks who didn't have the 4 seasons. So really dope. So Drea, okay, go ahead and tell us more about who you are and how you started your MCP journey, or even just really talk about your education journey if you'd like to.
All right. Well, Drea Siford, I just said I was originally from California and had a roundabout trip to Maryland via South Carolina for a few years and then Florida and now in Maryland. I actually worked in food and beverage, restaurant work for many, many years, and then switched to teaching 8 years ago. And I love it. I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. But for Modern Classroom Project, happened for me kind of during pandemic, shortly after. During the pandemic, I had actually noticed that a lot of these technologies that I was quote unquote being forced to use were actually amazing. And I saw students that wouldn't normally interact having ways to interact whether it was because they were shy or because they could use the technology to their benefit, for accessing material that they found difficult to access before. And so I knew when I came back into the classroom, I wanted to find ways to really leverage that. And I started kind of experimenting on my own with a self-paced form of learning, using Zern lessons because we were Eureka Math at the time. And number one, my math scores increased, my engagement increased, and kids just couldn't get enough. And I was like, oh my God, I have got to find a way to do this for all of my curriculum because I'm a 4th grade teacher. And at the time I was teaching all subjects. And, one day I'm listening to another podcast, Angela Watson's podcast, and Kareem was on there. And then I was like, this guy is saying everything that I found to be true in my teaching experience so far. And then, lo and behold, he was a DC public school teacher and I'm a Baltimore public school teacher. So I was like, this guy truly understands. He understands, the special challenges to teaching in this environment. And he has found a way to meet the needs of all of his students because I really had recognized that I was not doing that. And so I signed up for the free course. I took it over a summer. And pretty much I spent the whole summer redesigning the way that I taught. And then came back to school the following year, knowing that I could only do this with one subject and that if I could get departmentalized, that would be amazing. And luckily my administrators and other 4th grade teachers agreed to departmentalize. And I went with ELA to sweeten the pot for one of my colleagues who I knew enjoyed math. So I was like, look, I'll take ELA. You can have math. And then I started just like reworking everything. And within the first couple of weeks, my administrator, my principal came in and she saw what I was doing and was just like, "What is this magic that you're doing? This is insane in the best possible way." And it's just kind of like snowballed from there. Like it just keeps getting better.
Oh, I love this, Drea. And it's so interesting. I didn't know that about you, that you were into, like, you were working food and beverage, right? Like the restaurant work. And then how did you decide, like, oh, actually, I'm going to go into education instead? How did that like formulate in your head?
This is like such a crazy, I mean, this is a really long story that we, you know what I mean? But I had sort of been living this like, I don't know, nomadic lifestyle, you know, of like kind of like not really, more like working to live than living to work sort of lifestyle. You know what I mean? I had an education, but I also had like lots of friends that were living in places like Lake Tahoe and Key West and Hilton Head. And, you know, I could make good money bartending and waiting tables in places like this and living seasonally. And so like I just did that for many years, and it gets really easy to sort of just like stay on that hamster wheel. But like after a while, like I just knew that it wasn't like fulfilling me. Um like I needed more. Like I needed purpose, you know? And so like I didn't want to just like live, I didn't want to work to live anymore. You know, I knew that I wanted a job that like was help making me feel more like a part of something bigger than myself. And so, you know, teaching had always been on my radar because like I loved school. And in particular, fourth grade, I loved. So I don't know, here I am.
And that just worked out so beautifully that you're teaching fourth grade.
Oh, I went after fourth grade. Yeah, no, that was like I knew it. I knew I wanted to teach this. I knew I wanted to teach like those middle grades, like 3 through 5.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so great. And you know, I'm just chuckling with like the whole nomadic lifestyle thing, right? Because I mean, there's a trend now where teachers are leaving the classroom to go be bartenders and
I
be part of the
know.
restaurant industry, which I think is so fascinating. Because I mean, I was also a server one summer and made a lot of money in 6 weeks. So I was like, wait a minute, how does this work?
Listen, I took a pay cut to become a teacher. It took me like I want to say 4 years before I saw like the first like okay, I made as much money this year as I did bartending in Key West.
Holy cow. And how did you keep your like sanity, or rather why did you stick with it when you were like, oh man, I'm not making enough money? And I know I hear, you know, you needed purpose and, you know, you kind of wanted to work somewhere that's like larger than yourself. Right. And I love that. And I get that. Yeah. But was it just like a mindset shift of like, you know what, it's okay. I'm not making as much money as I used to. And this feels actually much better for me.
Yeah, and it was like I had my eye on like a larger goal. You know what I mean? Like I was looking at like years down the line versus like staying, you know, just thinking about this year because I knew that sooner or later I would make more, you know, and like things like pensions and healthcare and all of that sort of stuff like, you know, it matters.
Yeah. And how did you end up in Maryland of all places? Because you were going to all the cool places, right? Key West, Lake Tahoe, and then now Maryland.
Well, my husband grew up here and we knew that we wanted to buy a home. So like we were looking at the different sort of like different places that we had on our list. And like Maryland, I know people from Maryland will say this is not true, but when you've lived in places like Lake Tahoe and Key West, like Maryland is very affordable, you know, plus family.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that.
And I like it, you know, like Baltimore is like a very like, it's a very like blue collar city. It's a working class city. Like people in Baltimore are like down to earth and like real. Like it doesn't have like a pretentious feel to it. And like, so we both liked that.
I do have to agree with the realness of Baltimore, right? There is no, I mean, I never thought I would end up in DC. And so for me, I was like, I'm not going to DC. I'm actually going to go to Baltimore, and absolutely just love the people in Baltimore. Like my students, my colleagues, everyone was just so real. Like they keep you humble. Okay. And I love that. And then moving to DC, it was a lot of, what do you do? What's your title? And I was not prepared for that. So I really love that you said that. It was such a nice reminder. Okay, this is great. Some more, background information about you that I didn't know, which is really fascinating. So thank you for sharing and answering all the follow-up questions that I have. And so, okay, Drea, you learned about us in 2020. It's 2024 now, right? Basically makes you like a seasoned implementer. You've been doing it for a hot minute, like you said, you've been improving, and then also like everything aligned, right? Where you're like, I want to just focus on one subject, and then your school departmentalized fourth grade, which worked out really well for you. And so what are some of the strategies that you've kept every single quarter or year in ELA specifically?
All right. So a couple things I think that with like ELA and fourth grade that have worked for me. Like I know some other teachers like to put like a whole like unit out at a time, but I really kind of just like put little pieces out at a time for them. Like I have those like soft deadlines like often to keep them on pace, otherwise I feel like my students would probably fall behind very, very quickly. So like I don't give them a lot of lessons and then say, okay, this is what to do at the end of the quarter. But it's like, I use what I call, game boards. And I'll be like, this game board is for the next 2 weeks, or week or whatever it is. So that, it's chunking. It's not overwhelming like young brains.
Yeah, and that's a really great reminder too, because I know, again, right, we get so excited and we're like, here are all the things for the whole unit. And then I know for me, I would have completely shut down, especially as a young kid in fourth grade. So, okay, let's talk about your soft deadlines. How do you determine the deadlines, and how do you determine the pacing of the lessons as well? I know you said it's either weekly or every 2 weeks. How do you determine the deadline? Because I know sometimes our educators struggle with deadlines, and they often say like, oh, my students are way behind than what I had originally planned.
Yes. And that's, like I said at the very beginning, I just had a Friday, and these were like some of the discussions that I was having with my students, like that we can't take forever, on this, and reminding them that today was a deadline and that we didn't make it, like, so I gave them like one more day, and then it's like a for sure. But, I don't know. I'm very fluid with it. You know what I mean? Because like for me in the fourth grade, and also because, 75 to 80% of my students are multilingual learners, like I'm always like, I'll say this like to my admin, and luckily I have like cool admin that I can be like real with, is like I can be on pace or I can have them learn. And like sometimes I can't do both. And luckily, like my admin understands that statement. And so I might have to rework something a little bit later to let it go a little bit longer, especially in the beginning of the year. So I just am constantly sort of like weighing those decisions in my head about like, how vital is it that like they finish this? Do I need to give them more time, or can I just say like, we've got to be done and move on. I'm covering this again later in the school year, but it's a constant weighing and balancing act, I feel like.
Yeah, I was just going to say too, like kudos to your leaders for creating a space for you to just be honest and real, right? Like, hey, do we want students to be on pace, or do we want them to actually learn? And I think some context behind this too, in Baltimore City Public Schools, there is a curriculum that you have to follow, right? And there is an expectation that you stay on task, especially when you get observed, right? When you have like instructional coaches or just school leaders coming in. And so just some context for our listeners here, when we talk about on pace, like that was the expectation of like, hey, if I come on this day, this is the lesson that you should all be on, right? Like whole district. And what Drea is saying is like, yes, I hear you. And
yes, I hear you. And
we want our students to actually learn, right? Because like you said, there are plenty enough barriers for students who are not even multilingual learners, right, to access the information and the standards and the concepts that they need to master, right? And then to add another layer of, hey, these are students who are learning the language, is going to take more time. And so we want to make more time for students to grapple, to struggle, and then to master the skills, as opposed to saying like, nope, actually, sorry, moving on.
Yeah. So like my data had not been very good, and I just was like working my tail off all the time, doing all the things, but what was supposed to happen wasn't happening. And I didn't understand why. And so like for me, the first big aha I had was that I was moving too fast. And when I moved to a self-paced model, the kids showed me right away that I was moving too fast. And I started to notice like, yeah, it was taking me longer, but oh my God, they understood. They were learning, And so it was a whole new experience for me on what school could look like, how it could feel in a classroom, what this could be, and like, I'll never forget like my first year implementing, and it was towards the end of the school year. I mean, I literally got tears in my eye because there was like this one day I was just sitting back watching my classroom, and there's like a girl like skipping across my classroom to go and get her notes from the bin. And there's kids like just giggling and laughing everywhere. And it was just like pure joy in my classroom. And I was like, the model created this.
And I can just hear that, right? The giggles. And I love it when students get so excited about, I'm going to go grab my notes and I'm going to skip like that. Like, how adorable is that, right? That's really great. And I think that's one of the things too that I really love to focus on, is just the fact that like, let's bring back joy into the learning and the teaching of all the things, right? Because school has been schooling, and we got to shift some things around and get rid of some other things. I do want to touch base on this data that you were talking about, right? When you were on pace with the curriculum, right? Just as what the district was expecting you to. And you said the data has not been good. So like, clearly something's not working here. And I also hear too from teachers who first implement the model that their data is not that great yet. Right? Because again, it's just like starting out as well. And like students are, I guess, getting used or adjusting to this new way of teaching and learning. But from what my understanding from you is that you implemented at the end of the school year. You may not, I don't know if you had like numerical data, but I can hear from the stories that you said, like, no, my kid was skipping. They were talking about the work. They were laughing and giggling. That also is data. Did you see any numerical data as well, as far as like mastery was concerned at the end of the school year?
Oh no, for sure. Like, and I did actually implement at the beginning of a school year.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it. Yeah, so it was like you implemented, and then at the end of the year was like, oh, okay, now I'm taking a step back and reflecting on okay, got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, I'm trying to like remember like how the years went. I think it was like the 21, 22 might have been the year that I was experimenting on my own. And then 22, 23 was like the first year I implemented fully modern classroom project. So yeah, 22, 23, and then 23, 24. And now again, this is my third year of full implementation. And yeah, no, that very first year, the data showed it. That very first year. Like I said, my classroom is 75 to 80% multilingual learners. And so even though I am not a English development teacher, like an English and ELD teacher, I still feel responsible for that, especially because I'm a language arts teacher, and I'm teaching so closely with my English language development teacher that like I look at the WIDA scores and I care about the WIDA scores, and that very first year, we noticed a huge difference in our WIDA scores that very first year. And then in addition, my MCAP scores were better than they'd ever been.
Oh my gosh. And that's the first year that you implemented.
Yes. And then I saw the same thing again last year.
Yes. I love to hear this.
I'm assuming that I'll see the same thing again this year, but the data wasn't like awful before, but it's been, since I've done this, it's been the best.
Yeah, that's what I hear from educators as well too, who are posting in our Facebook community, right? Like, hey, if you need motivation, these are my numbers, right? And we just started implementing like this semester, and also just like the celebrations of educators saying like, hey, I had almost 100% of my students master the skill. And that in itself, I know when I was in the classroom was really difficult prior to implementing this model. And then this just kind of made it more doable, I think, right? And more like, oh, I can actually do this. It's not just a pipeline. Like, it's not just a dream. It can be a reality. So that's really great to hear as well. Thank you for that. And so I guess like the conversations that you have with your school leaders, how has that shifted? Have they just been, I know that you said that they're pretty supportive and they love the changes and they love the increase in data, right? Because we do love data increasing. Was there any other thing as far as like teacher evaluations or school expectations that you also kind of had to play around with or share other things to make it work?
I mean, a little bit, but at the same time that I started implementing this, my school was actually being remodeled, and they have a big initiative in Baltimore City right now called 21st Century Schools. So like all of these schools are being updated to become 21st century schools. And when that happens, your school has to choose like what sort of 21st century model are you guys going to focus on? And you can do like project-based learning. Blended learning was one of the options. And my school had opted into blended learning. So this kind of just fell right in with that. And one of the requirements also was for someone to lead a PLC within the school around blended learning. So I led a PLC in my building of Modern Classroom Project. So even though I'd already done like the free course then, me and 10 other educators in my building signed up for the mentorship through the virtual mentorship program. And we all went through it together. So trying to kind of like get more teachers within the building involved. And since then, one of those teachers has moved into a math coach position. And so she's bringing this into like our academic planning meetings now also, where like the teachers are experiencing this model.
Oh, that's dope. So she's utilizing it as a coach so people can really see and experience it.
And so that we can, work efficiently together. Like it makes my heart so happy.
Yes, I love that. That's so great to hear. And also, Drea, I mean, the whole concept of you getting 10 teachers to sign up, how was that process like? Did it take a lot of trying to persuade them, or teachers after your presentation, your teachers were just like, oh, no, like definitely want to do this?
Yeah. I mean, I don't feel like it was like too hard to get 10 teachers on board. No, like, I mean, I'm upfront with people, like this is work. You know what I mean? On the front end, this is a lot of work. And even my third year in, it's still a lot of work. It's not, it's less work than it was the first year or the second year, but it's still a lot of work. But like my, thinking behind that is like, it was a lot of work before too. And for me, it was inefficient and it wasn't working. But now is still a lot of work, but it's working better. Could it be better? Absolutely. It always could be. You know what I mean? But like, it is better. And so I don't mind putting in the extra work then. So I think that's usually to me kind of what like some teachers are always hesitant. Like they can tell that work is going to go into this, and I don't blame them, like we already have a lot on our plates. So I think that's the biggest hurdle always for me to try to get people over. But, one of the things I really respect about Modern Classroom Project is that it's opt-in, and it's one of the reasons that I love them is that they're never like, I'm going to push this model down your throat. It's like, hey, if you want to do this, cool, let's do it. And if you don't, there's other good ways to teach too. This is just one.
Yeah. And just the concept too of, I've heard Kareem say, like, if you pick and choose as well, the other strategies that, or other strategies that we were like, oh, do this for self-pacing, you're also more than welcome to do that. You don't actually have to implement the whole model. Whatever it is that we can do to support you, to make it a little bit easier for you, works for us. And you're right. I do love that part about us. And I think too, Drea, I want to highlight this whole, there's a lot of work to do, but we just been doing it inefficiently. Like we were not efficient with it. So can we do it in a way where it is actually efficient? And I think it takes a whole mindset shift for that too, right? Of like, oh, it's a lot of work. I don't have time or the energy for it, right? And then just naming the fact that, yeah, it is a lot of work. And this is actually going to make it so much better during the school year than doing what you've been doing before, right? And again, pick and choose whatever you want to highlight and focus on. It's also okay. But like you said, we can continue improving. So I really love that.
I mean, even for me, because I teach language arts, I feel like this model, if you're a math teacher, this model, it's like boom, 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 perfect, right? And Kareem was math. So that makes sense. With ELA, I find it needs to be a little bit more fluid, so like, we're finishing up an informational text right now. This is perfect for informational text. But the next is like a novel, and we're going to go whole group on it. I'm going to step away from the game board from a little bit so that we can have that experience of like reading aloud together every day and like, group discussions about character development and things like that, So, which is interesting because when I told them this today, there was a lot of cries. No, don't take the game board. When just 2 weeks ago, it was like, are we always going to do the game board? And like, once the kids get it though, like they do not want to stop.
Yeah. And that's what I've been hearing often is when students complain about game board, the self-pacing, right? And then they go back to whole group and then they go, no. Actually, I don't want that.
So it's always like a good reminder, for me this time of year for the kids who aren't still fully on board. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to do whole group for a little bit. And then they're just like, wait a second. I don't know if I like this anymore.
Yeah. And I like that you're mixing it up, right? Because it doesn't mean that you have to self-pace the entire time either. So, and we don't get rid of whole group at all. It's just like our whole group is just so much more intentional.
Yeah. There's places for all the different models and types of teaching. And I always just look at it as a tool in my belt and like, I'm going to use whatever tool is best for the job.
Whatever is best for you and the students, right? It's like, okay, this could work. This probably won't work, or whatever else adjustment you need, right?
Hey there, listeners. This is Zach dropping in with some reminders for the week of November 3rd, 2024. Have you always wanted a community to read books with? We are hosting a book club with ScreenPal and Cami. The community is reading UDL and Blended Learning by Katie Novak and Caitlin Tucker, and we're on our 4th session together where Dr. Caitlin Tucker will be answering questions. You can get your must-do reading pages for our 4th session, which is on Thursday, November 7th at 7 p.m. Eastern. Second, we're attending GaETC in Atlanta, Georgia from November 6th through the 8th. Toni Rose, our intrepid co-host, will be leading 2 sessions on finding your rhythm, building authentic relationships through self-pacing on November 6th at 4:30 p.m., and Rock the Remix, making blended learning inclusive and dispelling the fiction on November 7th at 3:15 p.m. We hope to see some of you there, and of course, registration links are in the show notes. Now let's get back into it with Toni Rose and Drea.
Okay, I'm curious though, Drea, you have to kind of walk me through. You said informational text, it works really well. How did you format that?
So I find that it works really well with informational text because that's more like, how do I put it? Like it's more like the input, you know what I'm saying, that we can do with with an instructional video and then having them like practice a skill. And then like check for the understanding and stuff like that. I feel like it just works better with informational text. So I might have something like in this one, there were numerous lessons on strategies for finding the meaning of unknown words, so like they would see me model it a couple times and then they would find a partner and work with them on finding the meaning. And then finally they're doing it themselves. And, with novels, I find that can be a little bit harder. It's not like those types of books aren't as like structured where you're going to find that pattern to repeat itself. You know what I mean? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. And I know that's another question that a lot of our ELA teachers are asking as far as like novel studies. How does that work with self-pacing? And also just a shout out to the read aloud. Everyone loves a good read aloud. I know I do, and I'm an adult. So, and I've heard also that high schoolers also love read alouds, right? And everyone and anyone love a good read aloud. So I'm glad that you're shifting, right? From self-pacing to like, let's go back to whole group and do this thing to, do this novel together. And I think, again, it just keeps it fresh, keeps your students on their toes as well. Cause it's like, oh, okay, like, we don't have to stick with the same thing all the time. Okay, so we're in October now. Y'all started in August or September?
We started like the last week of August.
Last week of August. So it's like almost 3 months. No, like 2.5, something like that.
Next week is the end of our first quarter.
Got it.
Tuesday.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So how did you roll this out to your students as far as self-pacing is concerned? Do you have a unit 0? How long did it take for your students to also get used to this, to adjust to this? And I think maybe I may have misheard Toni say that you were able to move up with your students. Is that right? Or
No. I want to.
You want to. That's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was. Toni was saying, yeah, like Drea wants to. And he was like, what teacher do you hear say they want to move up with their students? And I was like, gosh, me.
One of these years, just because I want to see like what it's like and I want to get the data for what it's like with a group of kids to hit the ground running, because there is like some time lost to like learning how to implement. And so like if you don't have teachers in grades younger than you that are already doing this, there is some like heavy lifting for you to do to get them used to this idea. And there's like some unlearning for them to do as well. And that can be painful sometimes because like it's them going from a very like passive form of learning to a much more active form of learning. And there's a mindset change for them.
Right. And to think, Drea, that they're 4th grade, right? So they've only been in school for like 4 years, really. And then that's, the whole unlearning process is really difficult. I mean, one of the things that my best friend told me, he goes, do you really think we can unlearn things? Like once we learn things, it's really hard for us to unlearn things. And I had to step back and think about it. I was like, yes, now it's really just recalibrating or shifting our mindset, like you said. And so I would be so curious if you were to ever loop with your students to see how that goes, because you're absolutely right. There is a lot of time that is put, like there's a lot of effort and time that is put in the beginning of the school year to really grapple and go over how to do self-pacing and how to be self-directed learner, how to be a much more active learner, right? So, okay, how long did it take for you to roll this out?
So look, my first year I did a full module 0, and like that didn't really work for me. Like I knew right away, I'm like, okay, next year I can't do that because I lost too much time. And, with multilingual learners and everything already taking longer than it is, it was like, or longer than I have, you know what I mean? Like I can't really like spend that much time on it. So then the next year I rolled it out piece by piece, a little bit slower. And then this year I just kind of, I don't know. I'm a very fluid teacher. You know what I mean? Like I'm very much like, well, I'm just going to see how the kids are and how they're reacting to different things. And when they're ready for a piece, I'm going to introduce it, and then when they're ready for another piece, I'm going to introduce it, So once I saw like how good they were with computers, I'd be like, well, hey, let's do this lesson where we're just going to watch a video and we're going to take notes, but we would like do it whole group. And then I put out just like a little 1 day, like a 1 day game board where, it showed them watching a video, taking notes, and then they had to go find a partner for what I call practice. And they had to do their practice together and then turn it in and then complete like a quizzes, and I'm like, what if you could do school like this, like every day, and they were like, yeah, So I just started like slowly rolling things out like that. And then I gave them their first game board. And, every day in that beginning, I would just kind of like talk about a different piece, like we would have this little introduction where I'd be like, okay, so let's talk about what does it mean to take good notes? What does watching videos look like? And what are some rules around that? How do I find a partner? How do I know when I'm ready to level up? Giving them like little personal anchor charts that they keep in their binders that show them, the steps to getting started. Like first I do this, I log in, then I go to the class website, then I, find my name and, things like that.
Oh, I really like that. It's really breaking down, like it's scaffolding, right? Or just building blocks anyway. So it's not just like, okay, throw you in the deep end and have fun.
A little bit of throwing them in the deep end, but at the same time, like every day, like adding like pieces to help them understand better. And this year, like they really took to it a lot faster than the previous years. Like these kids were like, I got it. A little bit of, like a little bit of like hand holding and crying in the beginning. But once they got it, they just like really, they took to it.
Oh, that's really good to hear, actually. Yeah. And I think it's also your process and procedures that you've created as well to make them really understand it that much quicker too. And so you brought up the blue signs that said, or you brought up level up. And when I went into your classroom and observed you, like I already knew you were a rock star teacher based on like all of my colleagues saying that you were. And so it was really great to see you in action, or rather see the students in action. And so as I was walking around, there were blue signs that said level up. Can you tell us more about that?
So I tried to like gamify everything as much as possible. So like their game board, when they get to like a quote unquote like mastery check, I call them level ups, because like that's like what it is like in a video game, right? They level up, like they understand that language as fourth graders. They understand what it means to level up. And so when they do level up, they have these little signs that when they're working on a mastery check, they have like little signs that say level up on them that they put on their desk so that other people know not to talk to them. And also so that I can see that that's what they're doing, so that like if a student is talking to them, I can kind of be like, hey, we're not supposed to do that right now.
Yeah. And it's a great visual thing for you, like you said, right? And so this is just kind of saying like, listeners, Drea didn't have a mastery check space where students got up and took their mastery checks in that corner or a setup in the classroom. It was just, I was walking around and there were a couple of students with the level up signs. And in my head, I was thinking, oh, they're doing like something really cool. And I mean, mastery checks are cool. But I love that because you got to know your students, right? You understand that fourth graders love gamification, anything games. And I do also just want to say too, I visited my best friend in Pennsylvania the other weekend, and she has 2 kids, and they taught me Roblox. And now, Drea, I understand why Roblox is so addicting. And I get the appeal to it. So it's like really just understanding your students and understanding the lingo that they use so that they can get excited for things like a mastery check. Like that's really dope.
Listen, these kids get so excited. It's crazy. Like they like literally cheer when they like complete a level up. They cannot wait to put their names on that little space so that they can do it. They will ask me if they can do them at home. Like I actually have kids get excited to do homework.
Oh, that's so lovely.
It's crazy. Like they're like, wait, you mean I can do this at home? And I'm like, yeah, the videos are at home. You can take your notes home. Like I don't let them do level ups at home, but like all the rest of it, I'm like, sure. And they're like, for real? And I'm like, yeah, for real. Right? Like playing a game, and it's like learning. And that's like one of the things that I really love about it is that like for fourth graders, especially, it makes their learning this very tangible thing on the game board that they can see. They can see that they're doing these things to get to this place where then they can prove what they know. And if they can prove what they know, then, then they level up. and then they get to go learn something new. They're on a new mission, or a new task, a new, fight the dragon, whatever it is. And, that's just like the way their brains think.
Oh, and oh my gosh, this is giving me chills because that's what we want. We want our students to be excited. We want our students to be eager. And also just pointing out, when you talk about the game board, it's tangible, right? And also it just creates this clear pathway. It's transparent. There's no surprises. Students know exactly what they need to do to get to where they need to be, right? Mm-hmm. And the whole concept of leveling up, I too am just automatically like, I want to level up. I'm going to do all the things that I need to do to level up because that's so cool. Of course, I'm going to cheer. And you just created this positive learning culture in your classroom. So I love that so much, Drea. And I could tell also with the students that I was engaging with in your class that they were just excited to move their pieces on the game board. God. I mean, it was just so dope. And then there was even one kid that just kind of looked at me and was like, I'm busy. Like, I'm doing stuff. Don't bother me. I'm like, you're right. I'm going to go now.
Yeah. Because usually even with like the kids, that in the beginning that are like, not like, I don't know about this. And, those are the kids that usually are like, maybe not into school and stuff like that. And in the beginning, they might be the kids that just sit there and they don't do anything. And you're kind of having to like remind them that they need to log in, that they need to watch the video, they need to get their notes. But sooner or later, what happens, at least for me with like the game board, is like they start to see their friends' names just keep moving and their names staying in the same spot. And then they see their friends like working with other people because they know that if they're on my game boards, if they're on a green square, then that's like, I get to work with others, and they want to go work with their friend. And then they're like, oh man, if I want to hang out with my friend, I gotta go do some work, and so they'll start doing work so that they can work with their friend because their friend has decided that like learning's fun.
Yes. And is that social piece too, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just the academic. I mean, academic comes along naturally, but it's the social piece. I mean, I feel like a lot of the times our students do show up for school because of the social piece. Their friends are there. They want to interact. They want to connect. And wow, what a great way to motivate our students who are are a little bit more reluctant and or struggling, right? It's just like, oh, okay, like it's okay if I struggle. And I know that these are my friends who I can talk to help me.
Yeah, I asked some of my students today, like I was like, well, I'm going to do this podcast. I'm like, what do you want me to tell them? How do you, what do you guys think about the game board? They were so excited. And the very first comment that I got was that it feels good to do the game board because you get to work with others and learn from them too.
Oh my gosh. I feel like we need to frame that because that's adorable and that's amazing. And that's a whole thing that's what we want our students to feel. Mm-hmm. We want learning to feel good for our students. Right. Yeah. And so, okay. 4th grader. Love that.
Yeah. I've got a really awesome group this year. I mean, I feel like I get an awesome group every year, but this group is like, they're really cool. I like them. I'll keep them.
Loop with them. But that just means you have to do 5th grade stuff, Drea.
Yeah. I mean, it would be like, kind of like revamping the curriculum and stuff for me again. But like at the same time, one of these years, it doesn't have to be this year, but one of these years, like I do just want to see what happens when I can hit the ground running, and what sort of growth can I see then?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause then, I mean, teachers who loop with their students absolutely love the fact that they don't have to they don't have to cultivate relationships because they already know their kids. Like the relationship is just continuous. So I'm excited if this ever comes to fruition, Drea, you have to keep me in the loop because I would love to hear that experience.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think also kudos to you, right? Because you continue to improve every year that you've implemented the model. And I love one of the strategies that I saw in your classroom is that there's QR codes, right? We love a good QR code, but this is something that I haven't seen in any of the classrooms that I visited anywhere. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to it. I don't know. But every single student had a QR code. Mm-hmm. And they would just like bring up the QR code and put it in front of the camera. And then they were able to access their learning materials that way.
Well, that's clever. That's the clever login. So Clever gives like QR codes like that way so that they can like log in to their computers basically. So like they could have like, and because I have like fourth graders with varying abilities, like some of them use QR codes and some of them like know their passwords. And so they'll log in that way. Although today I said, you're in the fourth grade now, we got to start like remembering passwords and like, what our email addresses are. So we had a little like, let's see who can remember their email address and log in passwords today. And they were all very proud to show me that like 90% of them are there now. So QR codes might be going.
Oh, but this is,
Although it's still good like for if I need them to log into like say a quizzes or something like that, like to use like QR codes that way. And I just learned this from my current ESOL like co-teacher that like I can print those QR codes onto stickers that I can then like put on to like index cards and stuff.
oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. I absolutely love it. And it's even better with your explanation too, Drea, of like, no, that was it was an option, right? And it was another scaffold for students if you need more time to practice your passwords, cool, right? If you have capacity right now to practice it, great. If not, here's a QR code, sign in that way. So you can it lessens their cognitive overload, right? Like it lessens the frustration levels of students who may not have the grasp of like, who may not know how to type words in yet, right?
Yeah, because like, again, we're multilingual learners here at this school. Many of my students come from Honduras, El Salvador, like Guatemala, and some of them have been to school before. Some of them have not. And so like there are a variety of learners in my classroom with a whole host of different needs and abilities and languages and knowledge that they come with.
And you're crushing it with this model. Like you're able to provide the needs, right? Because it's self-pacing, because you know what, we're going to take our time. Here are all of the different strategies to also scaffold the learning. So it's a lot more accessible. And I love it. That's great. That's so great.
And then for me too, like I don't do like the must do's and the should do's and all of that. Like as far as they're concerned on the game board, everything is a must do. But like I know, that the lesson on text structure is not going to help my kid that just got here from El Salvador. That lesson is not for him. So like I know that when he gets there, we're just going to skip him and I'm going to put him somewhere that's going to help him, that something that he can access now to help him with his learning. So that's like another way that I like use the model like differently than I guess the traditional model is that there is no must do, should do's. Everything's must do for them as far as they're concerned. There's plenty of other lessons that I know that only my like most proficient students are going to get to that lesson. And they're getting that extension that they need. And they don't feel like they're doing extra work.
Right. Right. And that's the thing that I've been telling educators too, Drea, is like, hey, you have permission to not label any of your lessons, any of your tasks. If you don't want students to skip the should do and aspire to do, don't label them. Everything is a must do. And then you have those one-on-one conversations because that's still really personalizing learning, right? It's like, oh yeah, cool. I know that the student's able to do this right now. Keep going. I know that the student will probably really struggle and may take a lot of time. We're going to pause on that real quick. Right. And I love that. Yes. And so the students, they never question you though, Drea, like
they do a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, they'll be like, well, why did he just get to skip that? And I'll be like, well, that remember that or he has to go with that teacher a lot during class. So like, is it fair that they should have to do all of this when they're only in the class half the time? So, we're going to say they don't have to do this part. Or then if a kid does something that not all the other kids did, and then we like stop the game board, I'll be, well, that's okay. You just got a bonus level. And then they get really excited about that. And I've even in the past have other kids get very upset that they didn't get to do the bonus level, which would have been, like the aspire to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, not labeling them was helpful. I tried labeling in the beginning, and that didn't work. It just didn't work. Not for the fourth graders. They don't understand the difference.
Yeah. And I was just going to say too, as long as you as the teacher, the educator, know which ones are the must do, should do, aspire to do, then that's all really that matters. Like your students don't need to know.
And for me, that list looks different depending upon the student. You know what I'm saying? Like some students have different needs, especially like in my classroom, like it is truly individualized learning.
Yeah. And I also just wanted to point out too, that just because some students are skipping lessons doesn't mean that our expectations are lower, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's not what it means at all, at all. It just means that we are creating this space where it's all the must do assignments that will really help them, right? Master the concepts that we really want them to know. And yes, we would like for all of our students to do all of the things. And in reality, it's just not real. It's not possible. I mean, especially as adults, right? Like I would love to do all the things. I don't have the energy or the knowledge or the capacity or the ability to do all of the things. And so again, just keeping in mind too, that it does not mean you're lowering your expectations. It just means that you are just creating this space where students have the time to master the skills that they need to master at that time.
Exactly.
Okay, Drea, I have a follow-up question because I know that you were talking about, or rather, I have an assumption that elementary school teachers are really good at small group teaching and learning, right? How has this model helped with your small groups? Has it changed anything? Has it made anything better? Or is it pretty stagnant?
That's a really good question. So, when I first started teaching and I kept hearing, teaching in small groups, and they would give me the model of like, so we're going to put out, these different activities, and I'm going to group kids like by their abilities. And then they're going to spend 20 minutes at each like little rotation, and then we're done. And that was so overwhelming for me. I was like, that seems like a lot of work for not a lot of payoff in my brain. That's the way that I thought of it. So what this model has allowed me to do is I teach when I'm using the model, when we're teaching the game board, I'm teaching entirely in small group all day. But my small groups are like so intentional, like everything I'm doing is so intentional because I am looking, well, who's behind? Why are they behind? Let me pull those kids, right? Let's address why they're behind. Or I'm looking at the mastery check that most of the kids just completed, and I'm seeing how they did. And I'm like, well, let's pull these kids that got 40% and let's kind of try to figure out, why did they get 40%? Let me look at your notes. Oh, you didn't take notes. That might explain it. Like let's rewatch that video and take notes this time. Or maybe there's a major misconception of some kind, but it's like the grouping has become so intentional. So it's not like I'm seeing every kid for 20 minutes because every kid needs 20 minutes. It's like, some kids don't need to see me. They got it. And they're okay with that. They'll come and see me when they need me. But some kids might need to sit with me for the entire day. And, that's just where it is. That's where we are.
Right. And that's also okay.
And yeah, exactly. But I feel like everybody's getting what they need.
Yeah, I mean, I like what you said about being intentional with it, right? There's a lot more intentionality behind it. And it's also data informed because you're looking at the mastery checks, you're looking at, what they're struggling with, their misconceptions, and you can do it right away. It's not like, oh, last week we did this thing and now I'm going to pull y'all in. Because I know that that's typically what happens, right? It's like a very delayed process of pulling students out based on like the mastery checks or the formative assessments that they did not master.
Yeah, this is a lot of catching misconceptions in the moment of misconception and correcting it right away. And then, of course, there's, the mastery check, which is like, I'm not going to help you with this. And that's a true check. But even then, again, I feel like this is where I probably take the most liberty with the model of like, I am teaching language arts. And with an ELA standard, it's like, again, I have to look at the student, right? Like, what is the progression for this student of understanding how to find main idea, right? Like, that's not going to look the same for every kid in my class. And so with mastery on something like that, I'm also a little bit fluid. and kids aren't getting the same, those mastery checks might be very differentiated depending upon, who's taking them. Sometimes like in their directions on the website, the mastery check will be like, come talk to Miss Siford. And, I've got 4 different piles on my desk, and each kid are getting very different versions of the same mastery check.
Yeah. And again, I just love to point out the progression part, right, of the skills. Like there is a progression to every skill that we're learning in the classroom. And so it's really good to focus on that progression. And I was also going to say too, I've had conversations with educators too of our mastery checks, right? If we're focusing on theme or the central idea, right? We just want to know if the student can actually identify that central, that main idea, that theme, and not focus on if they can write a full sentence that says what the theme is.
Right. For some students, yes, I need them to write that sentence. And for some students, it might be like, here's 3 choices. Which one? And I'm reading those 3 choices to them. And then they're pointing to the one that it is. Because again, I have students that have just arrived into this country to students who have grown up here their entire lives and only know one language, so it's a big variety in my classroom.
Yes. I mean, like you said, very much individualized, personalized, like all of these things so students can feel successful in their learning journey. And that's really what we want for our students to feel. They want to feel good. They want to feel like they belong. And they want to feel like they can actually do the stuff that you're asking them to do. So I love that. Okay, Drea, what do you hope to see in the future and what goals do you have? It could be modern classrooms or it doesn't have to be modern classrooms, whatever you'd like to share with us.
Oh, man. I know that there's been a big push in Baltimore, for this model, and that there's been the offering of like the scholarship. So that's been nice to see. I would love to get a group some year that have already had exposure and see how that would be different, so I guess I would love to see like more teachers implement the model. And like, I don't know, I just want to see like my students be successful, and they're having success with the model in my classroom. So I'd like to see them go on and experience it in other classrooms. I know we have Dr. S here who's also doing it. But it's such a good question. I don't know. I just want to see my students go on to be successful and like feel joy in learning. That's it. That's my whole why.
So I have a follow-up question to that. Is your 5th grade team departmentalized as well?
Yes. Yeah.
Is the 5th grade ELA teacher implementing the model?
I mean, she took the, well, I don't know if she's implementing the model, but I know she did the mentorship.
Okay. I'd be curious
she might be doing parts of it.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see if y'all can like collaborate and like have conversations or story time of just like how is it different? How is it the same? What are some challenges, celebrations, all of that good stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea.
Okay. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm excited about this potential of you like going and looping with the kids, hopefully one year. And yes, some year. It doesn't have to be the next year, but one of these upcoming school years.
I think it would be interesting.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And then I'd have to get you back on the podcast to talk about that experience because I think that's like another great perspective, right? So Drea, I know that our listeners are going to be like, wow, Drea is just spitting out all the cool things, right? How can our listeners connect with you?
They can email me, at amsiford@bcps.k12.md.us.
Beautiful. And listeners, you don't have to write that down. We'll have it in the show notes so you can just copy and paste. But thank you so much for sharing your experience and expertise with us, Drea. This was just so much fun and so lovely. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think like you said on the thing that I filled out, like to share a resource or something, I shared just like a picture of the game board.
Yes. I was going to ask too, Drea, to be like, hey, can we have a picture of your game board? But you're way ahead of me. I love elementary school teachers. Y'all are fire.
So like, just in case anyone like really likes that and stuff, like what I do is I create the game board in Canva, and then each square is linked to the directions in the class website. And so then that game board in Canva is embedded in the website. So when the kids go into my class website, they just click on like where they are and it takes them straight to the directions. But then to put it on my smart board, I just download a copy of a picture of the Canva game board, and then I embed that on classroom screen and add their name tags so that the name tags can move.
Oh, that's amazing. And that was literally the first thing that I saw too when I came into your classroom was your game board. And I was like, oh, yes, love this. This is so great. Well, thank you. I didn't even have to ask. So listeners, you'll be able to access that in the show notes as well. Thank you. Just thank you for that, Drea. I appreciate you. Listeners, remember, you can always email us at podcast@modernclassrooms.org, and you can find the show notes for this episode at podcast.modernclassrooms.org/213. We'll have this episode's video uploaded on Modern Classroom's YouTube channel and transcript uploaded by Friday, so be sure to check back to access those. Also, we are asking our listeners to leave a review if this podcast has been helpful in supporting you to create a human-centered learning environment through a blended, self-paced, mastery-based model. It does help other folks find it. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find links to topics and tools we discussed in our show notes for this episode. And remember, you can learn more about our work at www.modernclassrooms.org, and you can learn the essentials of our model through our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Modern Class Proj. That's Proj. We are so appreciative of all you do for students in schools. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.